Welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. Now I've only got 3 today, luckily. I'm a little bit later than usual, but you know, I always kind of get a little bit thrown off with these Sunday cards and the late night Saturday ones. Luckily, I was able to check every single weigh-in that came in prior to this. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna go to the main event of the PBC card, which is Subriel Matias versus Jeremiah Ponce. I think that's how they pronounce his first name. So yeah, let's get into that one first. Okay, so with this fight, you've got Subriel Matias, who is 18-1 with 18 KOs. Basically, he's knocked out every single opponent he's been in the ring with. The one loss he did have was basically a points decision loss, and it came, I believe it was the fight straight after, obviously, the tragic circumstances that happened in the bout with Maxim Dadashev, where unfortunately, he passed away after the fight. Now, apparently, that possibly took Subriel Matias a little bit by surprise. Obviously, I don't think he was necessarily training the way he was supposed to be training after that, and subsequently, I think he just sort of went into this fight, just tried to kind of get it over quickly, ran out of gas, and then kind of just got outpointed towards the end of it. Eventually got himself back, and yeah, ultimately then found that same opponent several fights later, stopped him, I believe it was within 7 rounds. So yeah, he's got form for basically being a killer. Now, Jeremiah Ponce is 30-0 with 20 KOs, so not the same type of knockout ratio and percentage, but a very strong puncher. People in the UK will know him primarily because he beat the brakes off Lewis Ritson about 3 years ago. I think it was 2020 or 2019, it was one of those two. Now, this fight to me is gonna be purely about who is able to control the center of the ring, because with both of them, neither of them are back foot fighters. They both are at their best when they're on the front foot, when they're able to get maximum extension into their shots. I would probably surmise that Matthias is the slightly better on the inside. He has he's got tidier hooks, in my opinion, than Ponce does. Ponce is the slightly taller and rangier of the two, so naturally sort of dictates that he'd want to keep it just a little bit further outside of Matthias's range of motion, just so he can kind of keep him on the end of his punches. So center ring control is going to be like a really sort of big factor in this fight. Also, who's going to be able to get the opponent occupied with the jab. Now, Matthias is actually very, his jab is actually extremely underrated in those, in sort of the 140 division. Like he comes across as a person that's just a walk forward, just trying to walk you down, break you down type person. But he's actually a bit more skilled than that, a bit more technical than that. He doesn't move his head as much maybe as Ponce does, so he could be online quite a lot for that backhand if his guard isn't tight. But he does have a good jab. He also does have fairly good foot movement. He's able to sort of get his feet into position so that he can get himself out of trouble as and when, it comes to crunch time. Let's basically say that. I think Ponce probably will be, again, slightly in terms of actual boxing, will probably look to sort of box and move a little bit more, just because he is, again, the rangier person. He can kind of control distance, and if he's able to implement and control distance, there's a very possible chance that he can start walking Matthias onto some of those right hands. But ultimately in this fight, I've actually got Subriel Matias giving Jeremiah Ponce his very first loss, and I do think that the knockout streak is going to continue. As soon as I feel like he's going to ultimately stay on Ponce's chest, he's not going to allow him that opportunity to sort of move and create distance. And ultimately, when you have someone who is having to throw to keep you off them, or is having to move to evade you, like their energy drains a lot quicker than yours. And I do kind of see this being one of those attritional fights where, because Matthias is just constantly on Sudbury, eventually he's gonna cause some form of crack in his defense, which he can then exploit, and he's definitely got the power to take him out. So my prediction is Subriel Matias to win this fight via KO. or TKO stoppage, and I'm predicting round between 10 and 11. So I'm gonna say 10, but could be the 11th. That's my prediction. Let's see if it falls into line. Okay, just before talking about the next one, want to give a big shout out to Zizo. I will be obviously watching the fight. I'm expecting him to do the business. 2-0 pending at the end of Sunday. So there's no real reason for me to give a prediction on that one. But yeah, just know I've got the utmost belief that he will get the job done in his second pro fight. Now, we go to Ilunga Makabu versus Badou Jack. Quite simply, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one at all. Badou Jack is a guy, came up from super middleweight, 168 pounds, moved up to 175. Now he's fighting at cruiserweight. Now, Badou is a very good boxer, but he's a boxer that takes a lot of time to get into fights. He never starts fast, and the fact he never starts fast, he always kind of gives up quite a large chunk of the first half of each fight that he's in, and then sort of digs it out towards the back end of the fight, normally to either get points or late stoppages. So he's also had form for being hurt in fights all the way down at 168. Now, he was hurt with Jean Pascal in their fight. Obviously, the Marcus Brown fight, you saw the horrible cut that, you know, took place in that one. But he does have form for being hurt. Even the sort of Papay Riviera fight, there was a couple times in that fight he definitely looked like he got buzzed as well. And this is up at cruiserweight now, fighting with arguably the biggest puncher of the cruiserweight champions at present. The only other person you may put in there is Lawrence Okoli. Now, when it comes to Ilunga Makabu, he's a lot older, a lot slower, doesn't have the same movement that he used to have, but southpaw, so you've always got to look at things from the opposite angle as to when you would normally. And ultimately, again, he is probably the hardest punching cruiserweight champ that's out there. Jean Pascal has never had the greatest of punch resistance. Even though he's not lost that many fights, he does get hurt in fights quite a lot. And to me, all this is going to take is him getting lazy in one moment, and with the extra weight that he's now got on his frame, he doesn't move and work as much as he was in his previous bouts. Plus, he's older. He's not accustomed to this weight as an actual fighter, boxer properly. So yeah, to me, I see nothing but an Ilunga Makabu stoppage. And because Badou Jack doesn't get started early, I see it happening within 5 to 6 rounds. Now, I could be wrong, and it could go a bit longer, but I'm envisioning 5th round TKO stoppage for Ilunga Makabu in this fight. Yeah, so 5th to 6th, but I'm gonna say the 5th. Put yours down below, let me know what you think. Okay, finally, we're at the big one. And you know what, initially I wasn't looking to purchase this pay-per-view, and I still might not, to be fair. Just because obviously I don't know if I should necessarily have to pay for 2 novices, you know, that neither have done anything sort of significant within this actual sport, but I understand the premise, you know, and ultimately I respect Jake Paul's hustle. Whether I like him as a person or not, I respect his grind and where he's come in the space of, what, 3-4 years. Now, it's a very hard fight to sort of judge, because initially my first thought was Jake Paul beats Tommy Fury easily. Like, I've seen Tommy Fury's fights. I've seen about 4 of his fights out of the 8 that he's had. He's not impressed me or looked even competent in any of the 4 that I've seen. And there's a stigma about, oh, well, Jake Paul's never fought a boxer before. He's only ever fighting basketball players and MMA guys and other YouTubers, etc. Which is fair, that's fair. But then I look at Tyron Woodley. I look at Anderson Silva. Those 2 in particular. So forget the first 4, or the first 3 people, I should say. But those 2 in particular. All right, well, I guarantee that Tyron Woodley would have beaten every single one of Jake Paul's Tommy Fury's opponents, including Anthony Taylor, who, by the way, is an MMA guy. that Tommy Fury fought. So, you know, this whole thing, oh, well, I only fight boxers, I've been fighting proper boxers. Like, you fought an MMA guy and got taken distance. Anderson Silva would beat the brakes off of every single person that Tommy Fury has fought also. And that's not even up for debate. Like, he's legit beat a former world champion boxer before, which is Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Like, well, regardless of what we say about him and his ambitions and stuff now, he is a legit boxer, and he was comprehensively beaten by Anderson Silva. The same Anderson Silva that back in the day was legitly going to go into the ring and have a fight with Roy Jones Jr. And it was actually Roy Jones Jr.'s team that pulled out of that fight, not Anderson Silva's. So to me, yes, old, yeah, cool. I get that, like an aging old man. But as you know, as was said at the press conference the other day, you know, a 50-plus-year-old Mike Tyson probably still would have dealt with every single opponent that Jake Paul and Tommy Fury faced, to be honest, minus maybe Anderson Silva. So the age thing, yes, it's something, but it's not as relative as they've made it out to be. But all right, so now you then have to look at, well, if it's not levels of opponent that you can use to gauge it, it's got to be experience and knowledge, right? Well, apparently Tommy Fury has been boxing since the age of 10. He's what, 23, 24 now, something like that. So that would then tell you, okay, he's had 14 years worth of practice of boxing, but he's obviously been trained by his dad or, you know, other, I guess, maybe local school boxers. Now, Jake Paul has been boxing, I guess you could say he started, 2017? Was that the first time when he fought Deji? Was around 2017, 2018, them sort of years there. So, all right, he's got, 5, maybe 6 years. But the difference between the two is Jake Paul has been in camp, like, buying and hiring the best of pros. Like, he was being trained by BJ Flores. He's got, like, the best strength and conditioning coaches. He's got a former, like, wrestling background, same as his brother Logan Paul does. And if you know anything about sort of those wrestling backgrounds, they are very grounded with good bases and center of gravity. I mean, Alicia Baumgartner's got a wrestling background, and you see how that helps her. Terence Crawford is a former wrestler as well, and you can see how it helps him in the ring. So you add that in to the fact that he's been getting high level and high skill level training by the boxing world for the last 4 or 5 years. He's looked a lot, he's improved. Every single fight he's had, you've seen improvements from the first fight to the last one. So you would say, well, who's on a better trajectory? It has to be him, because if anything, Tommy Fury looks like he's kind of regressed. There's been several times you've openly seen that his dad has not been happy with his behavior prior to fights, and has either pulled him out of fights or told him that you're wasting your time, you know, not coming into fights in shape, like, you know, not making weight properly. Again, very lackluster performances. His last were Daniel Puchinski and, you know, Anthony Taylor. They're just the last two. Neither of them look that great. So it's very hard to then say, okay, well, based on how these two fight, who's got a stylistic advantage? Realistically, I would have to say that they both are gonna look to be box punchers, or that is how they fight ultimately. You might say Tommy Fury could be more of a pure boxer, because he does have he's got the reach. I think Jake Paul's the slightly taller of the two of them, but Tommy's got the reach advantage. So maybe he might want to stay more on the outside and control Tommy with the jab. Control Jake with the jab, sorry. Jake Paul's, I think the one thing out of the two is, in all of Jake Paul's fights, I have seen, even though he has an air of confidence about him, you can kind of see it's very hard for him to hide when he's nervous or when he's being rushed in the ring. He doesn't have a good poker face. Tyron Woodley had him on the back foot quite a bit, like fainting and reacting to things that he didn't need to be fainting and reacting to. The Anderson Silva thing was a little bit the same. So you can he has tells there that if you're of a good enough level, you can read them. Is Tommy of that level? I don't know. Tommy doesn't have those same flaws or tells thus far, but that's also because he's never been in the main event of a show. previously. He's never been in the arena when it's jam-packed and all you can hear is just noise from wall to wall. Now luckily, because it's in Saudi Arabia, he may still not experience that, because we don't know how many people are going to be there or what kind of atmosphere they generate. They may not give you that raucous US or UK crowd that a lot of us are used to. So everything here is a swing, is a swing at what you want. Now ultimately, I'm going to say what I want to happen is I want to side with my Capricorn compatriot and ensure that Jake Paul knocks out Tommy Fury. To me, that's the best of all scenarios. But do I think that's going to happen? I'm gonna be honest, no. I think this fight goes the distance. It definitely doesn't finish before 6 rounds. Now, if Jake Paul can get Tommy Fury into the 7th round, then the fight is his to win or lose, because Tommy Fury has never been past 6 rounds before. And you can see his body composition, he's definitely top heavy. And I don't know if he's going to have the gas tank to be able to continuously mount an assault or to maintain range or keep distance or whatever for, you know, for 3 minutes of every round up past that point. But I think that he may get enough of the early part of the fight, the first 3 to 4 rounds, whereby he probably does just enough to win those, and then possibly maybe catch one of the last rounds as well, and obviously for Jake to make a strong comeback. But I see this going Tommy Fury on points, and that's not a prediction that I want to give. My biggest dream, the biggest outcome for me is a Jake Paul KO. And the only other option would be possibly to catch Tommy late, I reckon around sort of the 7th round, especially if he's flagging. But ultimately, I think that if Tommy feels like he's in a lead from the 5th or the 6th round, he's basically just going to kind of run or spoil and hold, and just get the victory. And I think that's where we're going. So as much as I don't want this to be my prediction, I'm going to say Tommy Fury on points is the pick. But I pray that Jake Paul makes a liar out of me, because I definitely don't like going against, I don't often win when I go against my Capricorn compatriots, and I'm not going against him in heart, just in thought. I'm using logic here, and logic dictates that the guy with the bigger boxing knowledge should get this, whereas the guy who's, you know, come on leaps and bounds maybe just hasn't quite got to that same level yet, but has still got a chance to rise and you know, expand past that. But yeah, that's where I'm going with it. Yeah, Tommy Fury on points is the pick. All right, leave yours down below, let me know what you think. Again, I hope I'm wrong with that last one, but I just got a feeling that I won't be, unfortunately. But yeah, that's it for me. Spaces Picks locked.